Welcome everybody to this second session of Fasting, a Contemporary Journey. And this one we're calling Building the Conversation. And I listened to people's responses for the last week's assignment and got a lot of good things. And some of them were about conversation, sharing, learning. That's a very important one. Let's see. Mary, which ones did you have? You had
I had a lot.
Yeah. But what I was interested to discover is nothing relating to building. So let me share with you three things that conversations have. And this is, so that's the next slide. So this is what happens when you have acting training, and then you go for counseling training. And then you go for a few other kinds of training, and eventually you learn how a conversation is built. And what you learn is that you share, if you're in a conversation with someone, a common vocabulary. And the second thing you learn is that you have to give a clear signal. So conversations have phases. Hello, how are you? And the person comes back, I'm fine, how are you? And you come back and I'm fine. Say, I was going to ask, and now you see you shifted gears. And that's a very clear signal that gears have been shifted. You're now not asking about them, you're going to ask about something new. So clear signaling. And the other thing is that conversations have stages. Initiation, hello, how are you? I'm fine. That's the first stage. Then you get, I was going to ask, ... Now you've shifted gears again. Then you get to, I've got to go. I've got an appointment in a few minutes. You're shifting gears again. And then you say goodbye, have a great day. And you've shifted gears again. Those are recognizable stages. And the conversation we're building for fasting has those stages. So let's start with a common vocabulary. This week's vocabulary words, and I promise this time they're the same on both slides. And like with last week, what I'm going to encourage you to do is to write 15 associations for each of them. Write quickly. Don't worry about it. If you repeat, that tells you how strong the association is. And as you see, these feed into the discussion that we're going to have nicely. So this week's words are sacrifice, abstinence, and austerity. And you can see that they're kind of related. They're very much of a piece. But I want you, as you write your associations, I want you to think about the nuance. So, abstinence, sacrifice, and austerity in the wrong order. Okay, so next, I'm going to start with a brief review of what we had last time, and this is the next slide. What you should see is this little face with M&Ms coming towards it.
We do.
Pac-Man.
Pac-Man.
Yes, so this was what, for years, my conversation with food looked like. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation with anybody who talks about the same doggone thing, no matter what you say, and no matter what's going on, they talk about the same thing. Isn't that annoying? Yeah. So I would look at a plate of pizza and want chocolate. I would look at a white birthday cake and want chocolate. It was horrible. And the fact was that I was hungry a lot of the time, and no one ever knew it, because to all purposes and appearances, I was being adequately fed. Now, in Luke, and this is the next one, in Luke, God makes a beautiful promise. He says, blessed are those who hunger now, that they shall be satisfied. Well, I knew what being hungry was like. I almost never knew what being satisfied was like. And eventually, I came to the realization that I was hearing a conversation, or I was I was missing a conversation that everybody else seemed to hear. And so as I began my practice of fasting, I began to ask, what does that conversation look like? What's it supposed to be? And so conversation has participants. Your body is a participant. Your body speaks, and it's going to begin the conversation with food. And it's going to say, hey, I'm hungry. My stomach is empty, right? The other thing it's going to say is, you know what? Those raspberries over there look really good. Those are two separate signals. And they don't always act like I just demonstrated them. Sometimes they act at different times in the meal. Sometimes they act completely out of order. The ending signals, satiety. So it's that scripture, blessed are those who hunger now, for they shall be satisfied. God really does expect us to be able to reach satiety a lot of the time. And then fullness, which is the signal you stop. If you put on a really tight belt, you can actually make yourself eat less because you've constricted this. So those are the four signals that the body gives you to say, get up, go find food, here's what I want. And now it's time to stop, you've had enough. Those, of course, didn't function in me. They would fire completely out of order. And this went on for years. Now, likewise, your body has to listen, and get input is what I mean by the word listen here. And it's going to be listening to your food. So taste is the first one, smell. Those get you taste and flavor of your food. And we discussed last time what the different tastes mean, and that's on the YouTube video. For those who missed the class last week, you can go watch the YouTube. And your eyes have something to do with this. Your eyes can tell the color of food, and the color is a signal to the body about what nutrients the food has in it. And then finally, there's this texture thing, and texture will actually tell you whether you want to swallow the food or not. A lot of people swallow reflexes are dictated by texture. So those are, your body speaks, your body listens. That's how it's supposed to be. Now, I think the next one is the one that has the 3 scripture references, yes? No.
This conversation has voices.
Yeah.
Your body listens to food.
There
There we
go.
go. Model
Okay.
fast.
Okay, so there we go.
Yeah, I missed a couple of keys.
Okay, so these are the scriptures. Last time we talked about the story of the Jesus fast. That's the famous fast where Jesus gets driven into the wilderness. He fasts for 40 days. I want to ask a question because we've got some fairly, because I think it's an interesting question. How many of you believe that scientists learn about human beings by studying the human body? How many of you believe that?
Not solely.
So we have learned most of what we know about the human nervous system and its development from a little worm that's about this long. It couldn't look less like a human being if it tried. It has no redeeming value in life except that it's got a beautiful, simple nervous system that's really easy to study. Now, I used to wonder why 3 times in the Bible, this fast story is told in some detail. And the part of me that's trained as a developmental biologist looks at this and says, it's like they almost want me to stage this. And so let's look at this a minute. And this is my graphic that represents the fast. And you can see the descending dove coming down and saying, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. And now everybody knows that he's something more than a carpenter's son. And then he gets driven out by the Spirit into the wilderness to fast. And here's the interesting thing. So I practiced extended fasting for years. And what I know is that when you get into a long fast like this, the first between 5 and 7 days are kind of miserable because you're still hungry. You're burning off carbohydrates. The body's still expecting to receive food eventually. And so it's still sending those signals. And so those are the days when you'll be tempted. And man, I can tell you on the first 5 days of some of those fasts, I was tempted to eat some dreadful things because I was still really hungry. After that, after you've burned off all your carbohydrate stores, the body changes gears and you switch to burning fatty acids. And even though the energy yield from fatty acids per gram is twice that of carbohydrates, you have to burn a lot of that energy just to make glucose for the brain. Because the brain has to have glucose, not only for energy, but also to function with neurotransmitters and so forth. So your body's going to shut down anything that needs energy, that it doesn't have to have. And at that point, you stop being hungry. And you just amble along and pray and dream, and you can't get out of your own way. And weather becomes an issue because you also can't regulate your temperature because that takes energy. You also can't hide from yourself because that takes energy. And but you just kind of go along. And Jesus goes along until he gets hungry again. This is this fast's natural end. And at that point, the devil tempts him and says, hey, turn that stone into bread. And Jesus knows what will happen if he turns that stone into bread and knows what will happen if he eats it. I wouldn't eat it on a bet coming out of a fast that long. And so, and most of the people in the Bible would know this because probably everybody's been on a fast of moderately long length like this. And so he says, and this is striking, he says, but the scripture says, humans do not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And so now, this triangle, right, that I had up there with God up here and me and food, this is what God is calling us to. And you will see this, the beauty of fasting, the conversation we build with fasting, any kind of fasting, is that it's revealed in stark clarity, this conversation. Man, humans don't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And so now we go to the next slide, where I, being the little developmental biologist, have now staged this. And you can see what happened at each stage of this fast. And if you go to the slide after that, what you see is the stages by themselves. The graphic has stayed exactly the same, but you'll notice that underneath the phase that I call maintenance, there are several times. There's 40 days, that's the one Jesus did. There's, I think, 5 days, 14 hours, different times. This is the beauty of this. Under this style of practice, if you're building a conversation, all fasts are created equal. If it involves at some point the ordered temporary abstinence from some or all food, it's a fast. And it can look like pretty much anything. And that's what we're going to spend much of the rest of this period talking about. So if you go to the next slide, you see these phases listed so that they're easier to write down. And they kind of make sense. So let's just spend a little time comparing this to the human conversation. Initiation, the phone rings. There you go. And you pick it up and say, hello, how are you? Initiation. And then you're going to kind of go into a maintenance phase. Well, Josie, I don't remember which is next in the honor series. Why do you keep asking me that question? I think it's mission of honor. And no, I don't have a copy I can lend out. Okay, beautiful maintenance, a little conflict there. And at some point, the conversation will shift. Josie, I gotta go. Look, try half price books, will you? And then, but can you imagine what would happen to Josie if I just hung up on her after saying, look, just go to half price books, bang. What would she think?
Lauren is mad.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to do that, right? So we've seen maintenance. That's the whole bit about half price books. What I'm going to do instead is, Josie, go visit half price books. If you want, I have a coupon. I can give it to you at church. I have to go now. I really have to go now. So I'm so glad you called. Okay, I'll talk to you next week. Bye. That is breaking. And notice how different that conversation feels. You're Josie, what do you think now? Maybe Anne's a little irritated, but she still likes me, right?
Mhm.
She's still in the ballgame. That's the breaking phase. And then finally, termination is the goodbye, right? Termination in a fast is when you return to normal eating. Okay, so now we've seen what those 4 stages look like in a human conversation. The next slide, I believe, says initiation purpose, right?
Yep, true.
Yep. So I did memorize the titles. Some year they'll invent they probably have one, I haven't gotten it yet, an audible title prompter for people like me. So initiation has some purposes. You're going to declare the intention of your fast. Notice that the conversation between Anne and Josie had a subject, right? Fasts, because they're conversations, ought to have a subject. And it ought to be somewhat externally determined. It doesn't have to always be completely externally determined. When I was just beginning my practice, I actually did look for external reasons for most of them. So for example, I prayed for the hostages in Lebanon for a number of shorter water fasts, and I did things like that. But you want to have a clear idea of your intentionality. You want to, I like to find a food for initiation, just what am I gonna usher in this fast with? I like to have a little bit of, I want to have a mental space for this fast to be in, and I want to give it the time, and I want to pray. And praying, of course, with the intention that you established. Do I have any questions so far about initiation?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Talking about having your subject and
Mhm.
basically that initiation,
Mhm.
intentionality,
Mhm.
can it be something as nebulous as saying, I want to grow closer to God?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not like I've never used that one. Oh, dear Lord in heaven.
I don't think that sounds nebulous at all.
No, that's pretty specific. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be essentially whatever you want to be. When I get to the 3rd session, we talk about keeping a healthy and rewarding fasting practice. I'm going to go a little bit more into why this intentionality matters so much, but that's an excellent one. Yeah, I want to grow closer to God. And I have been on some fasts actually where Lent starts, it hits me with a thud, and I'm like, okay, this is all I can say is I just want to get closer to you. I can't hear you anymore, God. I need to find a space where I can hear you. And I'm going to do it through some kind of fast. Okay. Any other questions about initiation from the remote people? Anybody else?
We have one,
Okay.
but she isn't asking a question yet.
What's she saying? Oh,
She's
just
smiling.
Oh, she's smiling at me. Okay. I'm smiling back. Okay. All right. So now let's go on to maintenance. Maintenance, if you recall the conversational model, maintenance is the whole discussion about the book, right? It's just conversation kind of meanders along on the subject that it was on. And in a fast, maintenance is the body of the fast. So in Jesus' fast, the maintenance phase was 40 days. I keep, as a rule of life, I keep a 16-hour-a-day fast where I don't eat outside of an 8-hour window. So that would have a 16-hour maintenance phase if I were keeping it as a formal fast, which during Lent I do. Maintenance, you're going to have a rule. You're going to expect a little bit of sacrifice. The rule ought to involve some kind of abstinence from some or all food. And it ought to be revealing. So revealing, by that I mean, it ought to tell you something about yourself. So what do you guys think of when I say revealing? Anybody got a thought on that one? Discovering? Yeah, what else?
So learning something about yourself.
Yeah, learning something that sort of sits right here about yourself, right? Wow, I didn't know I was so petty on this issue. Or, wow, you know what? I actually can do that better than I thought. That's what I mean by revealing. Just this stuff that you wind up the end of the fast knowing that you didn't know before. So ideally, your maintenance rule should be that way. Okay, so next we come to breaking purpose.
Yeah.
As I said before, you hang up. If Anne hangs up on Josie, Josie's going to go away mad. Anne feels like she hasn't finished her business. That's not going to feel good to either one of them. God doesn't like it either. So you want to kind of transition from the end of your maintenance phase to your termination. The breaking phase is like a little bridge. And I always like people to find some foods that they associate with the breaking phase. I recommend highly that chipped ice be one of them. Because if you get into a hospital and you've been told no food or drink for 12 hours before the operation, then you have an operation that's 18 hours, then you have to fast for another 24, and I have one of these ones. That's a long fast. And you're gonna have to break it, and the doctors don't know what they're doing. So if your body has been trained to recognize chipped ice as a breaking food, you eat it deliberately, you savor it, you imagine it has a taste, because it kind of does actually, and you swallow it, and you finish the cup of it. And if your body's a well-trained, good little body, it will say, okay, now I'm ready to digest food. And so I could get away with eating hospital dinners that the nurses would always do. Surely you shared that with your husband. No, not really. So breaking is, for my money, that breaking phase is A, the hardest to keep, and B, probably the most important outside of the actual maintenance.
And then, excuse me, after the ice chips, how much longer would you go till you actually had some solid food? Or do you go with juices?
Well, you mean how much longer did I want to go, or how much longer did the kitchen make me? So I ended up, if the operation was brief, I could get to solid food almost as soon as I finished the chip ice. If it was long, like I had major plastic surgery at one point, and they always make you go on a 24-hour no food, no drink fast after the operation, because if the graft or whatever fails, they need to take you back into the OR. They're really serious about it. And that one, I ate some chipped ice, and I think it was about maybe an hour and some before I really felt like I could eat food. But that was no problem, since the kitchen didn't seem to think I needed my meal for another 2 hours. By that point, I was ready to eat the plate. Exactly. Remember, we're having a conversation. And we are training our body to listen to our signals about truth. That's what we're doing. That's one of the things. And we're training ourselves to listen to God about the same thing. So, one of the things that this form of practice will teach you is how to recognize fasting opportunities that can be converted to a sacred narrative. Okay, very sacred to say, Lord, I am terrified because I'm a musician. I'm going to cut my wrist open and rearrange bones in there, and I am scared to death. That doesn't sound very sacred. But you know what? God hears that. And if you associate it with that required fast, he hears it even more.
The Lord, I want to make music to you is not a,
Right.
don't take away my ability to make
Yeah.
music. It's a
Yeah.
perfectly reasonable thing to be praying.
I really wish I'd said it in that kind of a dignified way, but I'm afraid that it was sort of crying and sniveling.
It's okay. Crying and sniveling is fair.
But see, this is the beauty of this conversation. It's your conversation. It's going to look like whatever. Okay. And termination is the last one of these, and it's obvious. Okay. Basically, you celebrate, you give thanks for having come through the fast safely. Eat favorite foods, that kind of thing. Next one, that's termination, which I think you
Oh, the
did show.
plan.
Okay, so the next one is planning your fast. This should be obvious, but I'm going to just go perfectly. So decide on an intention. Plan for your initiation, and I include this, or the initiation phase, I include this in this finding of food. Practitioners vary. I cannot go into a fast hungry. I need for my satiety signal to well and truly fire, which means that for my initiation, I have to eat pure fat. It's horrible, but true. And plan the length of your maintenance phase, and you'll want to plan the pattern of your fast. Plan some of the daily routines of the fast, and just in general, plan your termination and your breaking foods. Just kind of make yourself a mental picture of your fast and pray about it. And let God inform you that that's okay with me. Lord, I want to do an extended fast this Lent, and I need to heal your hand. That's not a good idea. That kind of thing. And now we are in a slide that says initiation prayer. So I I've given you 5 initiation prayers. They are designed to usher in a fast. By the way, this is the appropriate point to ask this question. How many of you believe you have never fasted before in your life? How many of you believe?
That's not true.
Yeah, it's absolutely, there is a fast we all keep, from the evening meal to the morning meal. And it can go quite long depending on how, if you eat dinner at 6 o'clock and you don't eat breakfast till 8, that's 14 hours. And most of us don't drink water at night, so that ends up being a fast with the maintenance rule that says no food or drink. It's a serious fast, and breakfast, of course, break fast, right? We all keep that fast. So let's go to the first initiation prayer. This one you should recognize. I have gotten to the point after learning that prayer at age 16 or so, where I almost just say that out of reflex. So I eat my last bite of food during the day, and I just say that prayer. The next one is a version of the St. Patrick's prayer, the be with me in my time of fasting, above me, below me, all around me. That's my way of making a space for the fast. The third one is a version of Psalm 139, and it's the one that, I flee to you in the darkness, but you were there. I come to you in the light, and you were there also. That statement out of Psalm 139. And finally, the last one, or the next one is Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. That's for when I realize that I've massively blown it. I've said confession, that doesn't work. I really need to find out why I did what I did. And I want to go on a 24-hour fast to do it. And so I use that one. And then finally, there is the beloved Lord, guide the hands of those who care for me for a surgical fast. And so now we're in maintenance. And I believe that's the slide that talks about the characteristics of maintenance rules.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, maintenance rules. Maintenance rules should be simple. They should be revealing. They should pose a challenge. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you some maintenance rules, and what we're going to do is look at them and decide whether we think they're good maintenance rules. So next slide, have the gluten-free.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going gluten-free for Lent. What do you think about that one? Uh-huh. Yeah. Now,
But you could have chocolate.
yeah, well, see, that's the thing. And you just hit on the art of establishing a maintenance rule. So going gluten-free for Lent is hard. If it has diet after, so if you I'm going gluten-free, and you could put on a gluten-free diet for Lent, no, that's not a good maintenance rule. Now,
Why is that?
well, it's too complicated. So if you really want to go gluten-free, you're going to have source products. You're going to have to find information about what it really is. Those diets are hard to keep. You want for a maintenance rule something that you can easily do without thinking about it. I'll go to the next slide. So if you want to explore the effect of gluten in your life, just ditching all breads, cereals, and pasta, right? Those are things you recognize in the pantry. Oops, not that one. Not cauliflower pasta too, because it doesn't taste that good. And, you know. That will work as a maintenance rule, and it will tell you if you wanted to explore whether you needed to keep gluten-free. That'll tell you whether you're. So is that clear? Why that one?
Yeah.
Why that? Okay. Next rule is I want to give up white food for Lent. What do you think about that?
What's that?
I want to give up white food. If you look at the graphic, it's pretty obvious.
That sounds simple.
It is. Now, you want to know what the beauty of that one is? So I'm not sure
Food
what I.
dye.
Huh?
Food dye. If I
Yeah.
want those mashed potatoes, I'll just dye
Yeah.
green.
Well, no, it's interesting about it. You can teach a fascinating health lesson with this one. Your snarky teenage son comes in, Mom, mashed potatoes, really? You said you were giving up white food for Lent, and that's so white. What are you doing? And Mom looks at him and says, oh, well, okay. Find some butternut squash and roast that. And what you've done by doing that is you've taken a food which, especially if you do it minus the skins, is pretty lackluster in nutrition. Changed it to something that's got a lot of vitamin A in it. And I do mean a lot. It's quite astonishing how much vitamin A butternut squash has in it, or anything orange, butternut squash, carrots, pumpkins, anything like that. So you take your white food, you substitute it with something colored, and now you're following your maintenance rule, and you're teaching a health lesson into the bargain. So that's really an interesting one. Yeah. All right, next we have peeps. As I read.
Yes.
Now, I have to tell you, I originally had this one in here as a joke. And then somebody pointed out to me that what, your 5-year-old kid might really mean that. Mommy, I want to give up peeps for Lent, because she knows it's ridiculous, that Easter delicacy or whatever it is available first Sunday. I know, I bought a box. And so she's, I don't want to give up beets for Lent. And if you're like my mom would have given me that. Oh, it's delightful. I'm so glad that's what you and Jesus decided. And then at some point, you can challenge that little something. You go to the store and you come around the Easter candy display, and Beth, it's just all the child Beth looks at us. Mommy, Peeps. I want to take those home. I love Peeps. And Mommy looks at Beth and says, well, here, you and Jesus, I'll tell you what, we need to finish the shopping. You and Jesus talk about it. If you decide you want to take that box home, if you two decide you want to take that box home, that's fine. But then we need to figure out what we're going to do with the box. In other words, play along and do it dead seriously. So that actually turns out to be a serious maintenance role for a 5-year-old. Okay, next should be the one with the coffee cup.
Nope,
No,
vegan.
that's the vegan. Yeah, so this is another one. I want to go vegan for Lent.
If you're already vegetarian, it might be an okay rule, but otherwise, no.
Exactly. And so if you go to the next slide, that's it. Just give up meat and cheese and try and see what happens. That'll give you the flavor of it, and it's an easy maintenance rule to keep. And finally, and this actually is the one I like. This is the one with the coffee cup in it, I think.
Yes.
Yes. Give up all sweets and calories from anything you drink in a cup. Now, how many of you sweeten your coffee?
No.
Oh, I got a bunch of people. How many of you drink juice?
No.
I do.
Okay, so
But that's not the cup.
well, cup, mug, vessel, whatever liquid, basically what you're doing is if you drink it by itself, you're giving up all of the calories and sweeteners. So there are some things that you would think are healthy that you wouldn't be able to have under this rule, like broth, chicken broth. That kind of thing.
Wine.
Oh, yes, wine, yeah, wine, beer, peanut butter stout. Oh, dear Lord. But it is a good maintenance rule for precisely this reason, right? Excellent maintenance. And that one, for people who are contemplating strategies to lose weight, that's a good one to try because you'll find out how easy it is to keep that habit. And if you can keep it, you can lose up to 1/4 of the calories you eat, depending on how much stuff you're doing. So it's an excellent maintenance rule, and not too bad. It's simple in concept. It provides a challenge. Finally, we are now on to breaking. I've talked a little bit about this before, and I think so. Breaking. You want to say done during Lent. You're going to want to pick some breaking foods. So, having done some extended fasts, my favorite breaking food of all time is grapefruit.
Is grapefruit.
Grapefruit, yep, because it's acidic. So, if you were coming off a long fast, you want to bring the pH of your digestive system down. And so grapefruit works for me.
Better than your ice chips?
Better than the ice cream.
Oh,
But I have never seen hospitals that serve unsweetened grapefruit. It's so annoying.
What else can you do besides grapefruit?
Oh, you can do, so what I have done,
That's in that same family.
you could do oranges, I've done those. I have also done a zingy non-caffeinated tea, like lemon zinger.
Oh, okay.
Cranberry, whatever, cranberry ginger, and then I put enough honey in it to thicken it up. Because remember that you were coming off a long fast. You want the carbohydrates to tell your body that it's okay, time to get with the program, right? So I actually, there is a concoction I make out of this lemon zinger and enough honey to really sweeten it up. And that, for me, will make me instantly hungry And if I'm coming off a long fast, I can actually drink that stuff. And then I would typically progress to citrus fruits and then maybe some more processed cereal that's easy to digest. Protein and fat would be towards that one. You know, for sugar fasts like the ones you guys are probably going to do, just associating a particular food is all you need to do, just so that it's special. Somewhat like we associate words in human conversation, like, well, you know, I really need to get on now. That's a breaking phrase, right? So you want to build up the same association. And finally, we have termination. When I finally get the termination, and for my 21-day fast, this was an 11 and a half day ordeal, breaking that fast. Finally get the termination. I can finally eat normally. Nothing makes me feel horrible. I want to eat my favorite food, doggone it, whatever it is. And so I will eat whatever it is that I really like. Once I've well and truly termination, I will say a prayer of thanksgiving. I will celebrate. I will plan a feast if that's appropriate. And that's the shape of these fasts. Any questions?
How do you handle this if you are not alone?
Hey, Scott, you want to talk about that? Go ahead.
No, I'm not sure how, like,
Well, I
Because
mean, do you do these breaking phases and termination phases by yourself?
I
or
end
you
up
would-
doing them by myself because Scott's schedule is so chaotic, we can't do them together. So the problem we have is there's a lot of calls in Europe. And it doesn't work, you know. For one thing, I keep a different eating schedule. And for another thing, it just doesn't work for us to do it together. But if you're doing it alone, it can be really astonishingly difficult. I like grapefruit, but I can't actually section a grapefruit by myself. So imagine you're my husband, here, could you fix me a grapefruit? So I slowly eat the grapefruit and I say, okay, I'm gonna go take a shower now, but you haven't finished breakfast. I know that. I want the grapefruit to sit there and have a conversation with me while I go take a shower, and then I will come back and eat the rest of breakfast. And meanwhile, Scott is rolling his eyes. But that is part of the challenge, right? So let's say you want to start a new habit. It's not will that establishes a new habit. It is how free of friction that habit is. So what you're trying to figure out, if you have to keep a fast alone, and lots of us do, for all kinds of reasons, if you have to keep a fast alone, what you're finding out is where the areas of friction are. So, okay, I know I have a much better idea now than I did before where the areas of friction would be if I needed to establish, you know, to make that fruit meal a regular part of my morning meal forever. I needed to know that. So that's the nice thing about these challenges that you run into.
Do you find that either A, once you're breaking this fast, that you have difficulty eating, or B, that you overeat?
So I don't usually overeat unless I do something stupid like eating peas. That's a whole different issue. Or Thin Mints, one. But I do sometimes have difficulty eating. Now, that usually doesn't take effect unless I've gone, 36, 40, 45 hours. If you've broken the fast well and you really reached you shouldn't have difficulty eating. If you still have difficulty eating, what you have to do is go backwards and try eating something else that's a little easier, and then go up again. Reason my 11 and a half day ordeal went on for 11 and a half days is I blew it about 3 times and thought I was ready to eat something that I wasn't really ready to eat and had to go back. That that happens. That's why of all the phases that are hard to keep, and the longer the fast, the more difficult, or the more complicated the fast, the more difficult it gets. That's why that's so hard to do. Because you go up, and then back, and up, and back. Not an easy.
So, and if you do like a 36-hour fast,
Mhm.
is it pretty easy, to break it and feel okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
and no. So it depends on what your diet is like normally and how you initiated the fast. So generally speaking, if your initiation and your breaking phase are fairly close together, like 36 hours is fairly close. If you initiated it somehow, I don't know, with something spicy, for example, like, say you initiated it with curry, which I dearly love, but I wouldn't initiate it more fast on that, not on that, because the effects of that can last the whole 36 hours. And then when you go to, well, okay, so you eat your lovely breaking food, la, 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 and your stomach's no, I don't like this. So one thing to keep in mind when you're doing shorter fasts, is that initiating food.
What makes a good initiation food?
Depends on the person. So I eat fat and chocolate with no real sweeteners in it. I use a little bit of artificial erythritol in it, but it's so little that it's almost savory chocolate. And chocolate, cream cheese, and peanut butter, and coconut, the 4 basic fat food groups. And I eat 1 or 2 of those. And and I sit and wait until that satiety signal of mine thoroughly fires. And then I'm ready to initiate the fast. Some people eat bread. I have a friend who used to be a regular practitioner, would eat a potato. That's her initiation. I'm like, I wouldn't do that on a bat, because that would make me hungry. And you don't want to do that. You want to go through your fast sated. At least I. Anything else?
I couldn't help last week when we were talking about if you break the fast with the wrong food, how you will get sick. I had recently read 2 different books on World War II, and it was talking about people in concentration camps.
Yes.
And how the GIs would give them their chocolate or their rations, and they would eat and they would vomit.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's a horrible way to do.
yeah, and it just really brought it to home. I didn't understand that happened at all until we started talking about it.
I had a friend who had anorexia nervosa. And I once ran into her. And being a fasting practitioner, I could tell how long she'd been without food by looking at her. And I looked at her, and we sat down to eat dinner. And here's her mom trying to make her eat chicken. And I looked at her mom and I said, man, you can't do that. She can't eat it. She really can't. She's not just faking it. And trying to get anyone. In the Bible, you would have known this, you understand. Everybody would have understood that you don't come off a 21-day, 30-day fast and eat protein. You just can't. My mother-in-law was in the hospital. She had some digestive operation that required that they shut down her digestive system. And the doctor somehow thought that as soon as everything was healed and she could go back to eating, that she ought to eat bacon and eggs. And they were fine. And I finally wrote to my father-in-law and said, your wife's just been on a 30-day fast. She needs to break it. Here's how you do it. It will take her 15 days, just so you know. And after apparently they found somebody who would follow my instructions, and she came out of the phone. But it's astonishing how many medical people think that if they've supplemented, if they've put nutrients in by IV, well, that's fine. We don't need to break it. wrong.
Totally separate from, what they're sticking in your veins.
Well, see,
Yes.
doesn't that make sense? I could not figure out why my mother-in-law's doctors didn't know this. It was just astonishing to me.
So you tend to break it with, not proteins, not fats, but
Fruit,
starches,
So simple carbohydrates first,
simple carbs.
then starches, and not sucrose. So stay away from foods that are really heavily sweet. You want something.
So you could go back to your white food.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so anyway, I just have a few slides about teaching children. Where are we on time?
You've got 5 minutes left.
Okay, you know what? Let's skip those last slides. We've covered them
Okay.
and go on to the last. There's some discussion questions. Scott was right. I owe him a big fat chocolate chip cookie. He looked at us and got too many slides. He's right. So
Now you're back in the triangle.
Yes.
yeah, so this is what, so getting to this triangle is for me what fasting is all about. And as you've seen, we have provided some opportunities for building body awareness, building taste awareness, listening to God, listening to others. If the person you brought up, do you fast together, or what happens if you fast alone? That's a really astute question, because what you then need to do is listen to what the members of your family are saying, because that matters. You got to live with these guys, and you don't want them to wind up not liking you. So it's a great way to listen. When we come back next week, we are going to explore the conversation a little more. We're going to look at patterns of fasting. We're going to look at how people with health constraints conceivably could fast, because under this practice, you can do it fairly straightforwardly. Why on my YouTube video, the introduction, I said a reserved yes. Assuming that your body is, you can keep to your health rules and find a maintenance rule that'll let you do that. You can go on. And in short, what I intend to do is finish up what I started, which is to find for everyone a healthy, rewarding, and safe way to practice fasting. So there you go.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you guys for putting up with me, and thanks Scott for being my slide mover.
The answer.
Scott, you want to end sharing, screen sharing?
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It turns out to be remarkably freeing not to worry about whether I have to look at my slides.
If you have any questions.
Does that
Really good chat.
what's that?
There was one participant remote.
Oh, okay.
Carol, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I just getting lots of information. A little teeny bit lost, but anyway. I'm just, I really started this class because of the intensity of that your prayer life matters with this practice. And so I'm just trying to figure it out. I didn't have the intention of doing a 20-day or a 40-day or a 30-day.
Nobody does.
How does that work? For maybe you set aside a day a week as only your fasting day and your prayer day.
Yeah, exactly.
And then so you don't have to follow quite such strict rules in that practice, I would assume,
Right.
as with this, because it's not that long of a time. It's not the only time in my life I've never not eaten for a day, or something.
What you want to do is keep the structure in mind. So if you want to do a 24-hour fast, do a little initiation prayer, keep your 24-hour fast, separate your first thing that you eat for your breaking phase from the rest of your first meal by about half an hour. That's all you need. And pray along with those phases.
Okay.
It's the phases, this style of practice, it's the phases that matter.
Okay.
So that's the key.
Great, thank you.
Wow.
So I'm a little confused. You talked about in terms of maintenance rules,
Uh-huh.
trying to find something that's simple.
Uh-huh,
For example, not eating white foods.
right.
But so can a fast be a fast from a specific item like white food?
Yeah.
Or is a fast mean no food at all
No,
except
no, it
water?
can be from a specific item.
Okay,
That's the thing that people get confused, is that you really want to, you really want to make it so that you have a rule, but technically fasting is abstinence from some or all food. Some can be a single one. I've done years when I gave up, chocolate. I've done, years when I gave up the fruits that I like. I like tropical fruits, and so I've decided to not have those, you know. Sometimes it's random things, but it's always something that it's going to be a challenge to give up. That's the main point.
thank you.
Yeah, I don't want people to get an idea that my style of practice is strict. It isn't. Just, it's structured, right? Because you want to do the phases, but there's a wide range of creativity in those phases. So,
Well, thank you very much. We're looking forward to the third and final session next week.
yeah.
Excellent.
I really
Thank you.
Excellent.